Hello, can everyone hear me? Hello. All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the career panels for the academic job track. We have a great lineup of panelists, all in person for this track. The format of this session is that we are going to have all the panelists introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about where they're from, tell you a bit about their research, where they did their PhDs. And then we're going to open the floor up for questions from you all. So be thinking about what type of questions you want to ask, and we'll walk around with a mic. When you get the microphone, please remember to introduce yourself with your name and your affiliation. And I want to first introduce us. I should have started with this. I didn't even do this. I'm Lauren Stadler. I'm an assistant professor at Rice University. I'm co-hosting this with Courtney Gardner.
I'm at Washington State University, the other Washington on the other coast. So it's nice to be here. Thank you. And our panelists include Dr. Amy Pruden from Virginia Tech, Dr. Delgado Vega from Howard University, and I'm Dr. Rolls, yes. Dr. Rolls, Dr. Plata, and Dr. Adelaide. So wonderful. Yes.
Okay, so can each of you kind of go through, tell us again, kind of where you are, like what rank you are, your university, what department you're in, and where you did your PhD and whether you did a postdoc or not. All right, well, happy to kick us off and thank you for organizing this session. It's great to see the turnout. So I'm Amy Pruden. I am a professor at Virginia Tech in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. I've been there about 15 years. I am a full professor at this point. I started out my career, I did my PhD at the University of Cincinnati, and then I was an assistant professor at Colorado State University, and then I moved to Virginia Tech. My undergraduate degree is in biological sciences, so there was kind of a fun and interesting shift towards identifying more as an engineer, and here I am.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hessa Delgado Vela. I'm an assistant professor at Howard University. I've been there for 4 years. My undergraduate degree was in civil engineering at UT Austin, and I did my PhD at the University of Michigan, and I broadly do wastewater treatment and microbiology.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stetson Rolls, and I just finished my first year as an assistant professor at Georgia Southern University. We are a primarily graduate institution. I did my PhD at University of Texas, and then did a 1-year postdoc at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And my research interests are kind of at the interface of technology development and sustainable design, with a focus on advancing clean water and sanitation for underserved communities.
Hi, everybody. I'm Desiree Plata. I'm an associate professor at MIT in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. My undergraduate degree is in chemistry from Union College. I have a PhD in chemical oceanography and environmental chemistry from MIT and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. And I have worked at Mount Holyoke College, Duke University, and Yale University prior to going to MIT.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adeyemi Adeleye, and I'm an assistant professor at UC Irvine. Some of you probably heard me say that earlier. Prior to that, I did a 2-year postdoc with the EPA. I got my PhD at UC Santa Barbara. I also got a master's degree along the way, and I'm from Nigeria. That's where I got my bachelor's degree from. My research is looking at the environmental implications of emerging contaminants, primarily interested in PFAS right now. And this is my 4th year as an assistant professor.
Grab this for me just for a second. All right. Thank you all very much for being here. And with that, we are going to go ahead and open it up to all of you to ask the burning questions that you have about what it's like to be and stay in academia. So in the front. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes, we're running a mic over to you.
Hi, I'm Wensi. I'm currently a postdoc at Europe University. I guess we're all curious about what do you think is the most important thing that we can get a job in academia?
Who would like to start? Desiree? Sure. Yeah.
I mean, what's the most important thing you can do now in order to get a job in academia? You need to publish papers, right? So don't submit an application for a job with one published paper and then like 5 in prep articles. That's very damaging to your career, actually, because you look like someone who's very naive and doesn't understand the metrics for success. I don't care if it's a Nature paper; it needs to be more than one published paper. And so there may be people in conflict. I have heard of cases where someone does get hired with one published paper, but they're like super promising, and it's very rare. So publish papers. That's the most important thing you can do. I would rank the second most important thing you can do as making connections with letter writers who are going to be supportive and cognizant of you as an individual and intellectual. And it is helpful if those people have name recognition, but it's not necessary.
I completely agree with that. But I will also say it's important to recognize that you can do a lot to set yourself up for success, but there is so much about the academic job market that is luck, about which openings are there in a given year and whether they align with your interests. And so you should set yourself up year after year for success, and getting those papers out is definitely really important. Doing conferences, presenting, talking to people, making an impression. I agree with all that. But
Yeah, great advice. I would also add, taking a step back, like, is an academic career path right for you, right? So I'm glad that you've set this up so that they see there's lots of career options with a PhD in our field. Being a professor is not for the faint of heart. It is very, very hard work and it's stressful, but if that's, what you want to do, and you have that passion, then, I think you can go for it, but you want to make sure your heart's in the right place, that, you're willing to work hard. And because, we're a field that, we have this charge to help humanity, right? So that should be first and foremost your goal. And if you don't get tenure, that's okay. There's other jobs.
Just to echo that a little bit, I think one thing you maybe can start thinking about too is like what vision you want to have. What work do you want to do? What work have you done that's going to help you do that work? And, what's your long-term vision, basically? I think that's something that you can spend some time maybe thinking about.
Hello. So, speaking of publication, how important are?
Yeah, introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry, I'm Benjamin from Michigan Tech, a PhD candidate. So, how important are postdocs if you want to go to academia? And how many would you recommend? Like doing 1 postdoc, 2, 3?
So I actually went straight through. So I did my PhD, and I went to the assistant professor position. I applied in parallel to postdoc positions and academic positions at the same time. And it just happened that an opportunity came along that I was very excited about. I kind of tried to negotiate a postdoc because I think it's a really good time to just focus on research and not be thinking about teaching and grant writing and service and all these other things that we have to do. And so I actually think that if I had to do it all over again, I would have negotiated harder for the delayed start to do the postdoc.
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question directly, I think if you have to choose between several 1-year postdocs and 1 2-year postdoc or 3-year postdoc, it's better to have the longer term postdoc where you can actually move to a product in a meaningful time frame. I think the postdoc is one of the most pure academic experiences you're going to have. You don't have the burden of supporting other people usually. You don't have your PhD looming over you. You should really take advantage of that. And hopefully that postdoc adds a component of research to your life that supports your long-term vision. So when you go into those faculty application processes, because you have kind of that logical flow path. The reality is that most of us just make up a logical flow path after we found a postdoc, but it's nice if you can say, you know, these two skill sets that I have now complement each other in this way, and it's ultimately supportive of my vision. I think in our field, it's very uncommon to see postdocs that are 4 and 6 years long, and you start to look like stale bread at that point. And so you really want to be moving out of that postdoc position, even if you're at the same institute and you get yourself some teaching opportunities or a different title that is a research scientist where you're allowed to write and potentially win awards. You have to kind of strategize around not being in a 4 or 6 year postdoc. In biology, that's very acceptable, but it's generally carries kind of a negative tone if you're in a postdoc for too long in civil and environmental engineering. I don't know if others have had that experience on job panels.
Yeah, just to add to what's been said already, I would advise you try to get a postdoc, and if possible, somewhere outside of where you did your PhD. I took a shot at working with the government for 2 years as a postdoc. It was a time to actually breathe. I rested before getting to this position, but that wasn't my ultimate goal. I just needed to find other people that can write me letters, see what it is like to work with the government. Maybe I could also have people that can help me with grants in the future. So postdoc could be a time to also make up for any deficit you see in your CV before you jump into academia position.
Just while they're picking up the other person ask a question, I'll just add, I think one thing that can help you too when you do a postdoc is trying to learn, along with additional research skills, additional, management skills, time management, how to work with people, different communication skills. I think some of those things that I picked up during my postdoc have been tremendously helpful to me as an academic.
Hello, John Asaipe at Duke University. My question is, I have kind of a two-part question. The first one is, how do you know that an institution is a good fit for you? And the second part is what to do your first year in academia to most set you up for success in your later years for tenure.
I feel like everyone's looking at me. Institutions. I guess I'll just eat this one. It's hard to know that an institution is right for you before you are actually in it, but that should be part of your job application package, right? You shouldn't be submitting the same application to every institution. You should say, like, this place has these key people, and this is how I augment the team, or this is this key resource, and this is what I need for my research. So you want to do everything you can to kind of identify the ethos of the place before you go, what their needs are, what your needs are. And your job package should reflect that matching and that synergy. That's often what people are, like, the defining feature people might be looking for, not just intellectual talent, but how does this person strengthen us as a unit, and likewise. So I often tell people, look for a geography where you like to live, right? Because and I know that that's like very optimistic, because as Hessa said, the stars kind of have to align. The institution has to want somebody who does what you do, and that's very difficult, but place really can support, what your partner is able to do if you have access to family. So think a lot about region as opposed to applying everywhere, and then think about the institutional match and how it complements your research and where you're going to be able to thrive. And then the second question was what to do in your first year. This is going to be a very controversial statement, but I would say do not apply to grants. Because you will not get them as an individual investigator. If you are asked to join a team, you should definitely do that, because you're going to learn a lot about the grant writing process. But in your first year, I would contact as many program managers in programs that are going to be able to fund you as you can, and offer to serve as a reviewer. And this is going to let you see awards and many examples of awards that are successful at panel and awards that are not successful at panel. And you're going to go into that first grant writing experience much stronger. So I know PIs who submit 12, 13 grants their first year, they don't get any of them. And one of the criticisms is this person doesn't know how to manage an award. That's a throwaway criticism. That's not really fair, but it's used and can be very effective against you. And so if you can add, collaborators, the sole PI award is almost all but extinct, but adding collaborators is really very helpful. And getting that grant reviewing experience can help you really understand what's necessary to put together a good program for NSF and DOE and EPA and NIHS and all of those things. So that's my advice to like optimize your time management in your first year. I think. Yeah, we'll go that way.
I would just like to add one thing to the first question, which is how to know if a school is a good match. One thing you could do in addition to what Desiree said is to really see if you can find someone within that department that you can talk to. For the most part, people rely on the information available on the websites of departments. And a lot of times those information could be stale. You know, you could be writing your package saying you will collaborate with someone, but that someone may have even retired or they've moved to another school and they've just not updated the website. So it helps if you can, put as much work into finding someone that is actually there that you can talk to, figure out what they are really looking for, and get more information to really see if that's a place you want to work or not. So it helps. It's a lot of work to find someone everywhere, but it's worth it if you can do it.
I had a quick comment on the second question about what to do in your first year. I did think a little bit, but I think the thing that I did that was the most helpful was building a support network of other assistant professors. So I had colleagues that were at other institutions that helped review my grants that had been through it a little bit, were a little bit ahead of me but still willing to give the time to review my materials. And so I think that was really important. And I also built a network of support that was outside of my discipline, but was also really, really important for just navigating the institution, understanding how other institutions work and everything like that. So I think that was actually really important for me.
And back to the first question, which institution? I think just to be aware that there are many varieties out there. So some are big, some are small, some are public, some are private. Some are more teaching oriented, some are more research oriented. So Virginia Tech I love because we're very service oriented. We're a land grant. Colorado State was also a land grant. So I guess I like land grants. But if you can get some experience teaching, some PhD programs offer that, you can get a feel for, whether that's for you or not. And at Virginia Tech, we have a program where PhD students can teach a semester-long course, and they either love it or hate it. But either way, it's a good experience. And some of them have walked away saying, you know what, I want to go to a teaching school. And others have said, you know what, I want to go to a research-focused school. So just something to think about.
Hello, I'm Karthikeya from Temple University. I just wanted to know, how do you stay motivated even after an academic job? You said it's not for the faint-hearted, but how do you stay motivated with all the grants, all the students, all the research, all the time?
That is an excellent question. So again, some of it comes to you have to be self-motivated, like for sure. That's a big part. But even then there's ups and downs. And so one decision to make is how big do you want your research group to be? Obviously, there's going to be certain expectations for tenure, and usually, they want you to graduate at least one PhD student. Most universities have that requirement. But, my group is huge. That's just kind of, I was excited about a lot of things and it just grew and grew, and I just love students and teaching. And so here I am. So I'm very busy. So I have to be very self-motivated. Like 12. So so I'm very busy, but I love it. And the students really motivate me, honestly. For me, I get a lot of energy working with others, both students and faculty, but you kind of have to find what works for you. I think an average size group that's more manageable for most people is probably 4 to 5. So.
I also will echo that students keep me motivated. But it's okay. It's a marathon, not a sprint, right? So it's okay to recognize that and take a beat if you're facing a lot of rejections, and just like take a deep breath and then keep going. Yeah.
One thing that in my short 1 year keeps me motivated though is kind of the flexibility that academia offers. And you might start to try and realize, even in grad school, like I have certain times that I know I work really effectively during the day. And I know during those times I'm going to work on these things that I really need to be focused. During those other times where I'm really tired, or, I'm going to get done with these other more monotonous things that, don't require my full attention. So kind of compartmentalizing that helps me a lot. And I think the flexibility that academia offers compared to a traditional 9 to 5 can really help that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's going to find different motivators for themselves. For me, it's really about like the mission of the research program that I'm building and what we're trying to accomplish on like a national, international scale. And so that is very helpful, right? When because you're always going to have like our field kind of works on the basis of rejection, like negative feedback, and in a lot of cases you need something to kind of motivate you up and over that. Like, oh, I'm going to help you see why this is the way I think this should be done. Here's the data that support that. So that can be very motivating. Obviously, mentoring students can be very rewarding. Teaching can be very rewarding. Service, I think, is the one that's like the hardest thing that people can make decisions about. And so oftentimes you're just gonna, the kind of status quo is you do a bit of department service, a bit of institutional service. You should make a choice about that service, and you should be sure that you're not just like a body in a chair, like filling a role. And that happens especially to underrepresented persons. So I'm very conscientious about the service roles that I take on. I do way more than I should, but I make sure that when I bring an idea, it's going to be at least, entertained and discussed and listened to, that I'm going to have ability to kind of make movement or impact in that service. And it has to be something that I care about the outcome of. I don't want to do service that isn't going to amount to something that I really care about. And so that kind of ties into the overall mission of what I want to do in my work and service. We have a lot of roles that we fill. And so you should find the rewarding bits of each of those.
Hi. Oh, can you hear me? I'm Ariel Robinson from University of Kentucky. What do you find is your biggest challenge in academia?
I can kick us off. I think what I didn't expect is before I started was how much all the roles that we have to fill and how much task shifting you have to do. It's really challenging to try and manage everything and manage all the hats that we have to wear. So I think that has been the biggest adjustment for me, is figuring out kind of how to manage it.
You haven't gotten one yet, huh? Maybe.
Well, I guess I'm kind of echoing that, is just trying to figure out how to prioritize things. I try and use that 4-quadrant system a lot of time, and I think that's helped. Important, do soon kind of things, but that's still a challenge. What's actually important? What's actually do soon that I need to focus on? So prioritization, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think I totally support both of those statements. What you have to realize is your life is going to get chunked into like 15-minute or 1-hour increments, and you're going to have to be able to be productive in all of those increments. So really good advice about finding a prioritization scheme, and not just for your work, but for your life as well. How do I want to balance my work and life? And you're paying attention to how you spend your time is going to be very supportive of that prioritization scheme. It'll also make it easier for you to make a decision when faced with a question, should I do this thing? You're always going to be asked to do more than you can possibly do in the hours of the day. And so you've got to have a plan to make choices. So I really endorse those opinions, but to be more direct about what I think the most difficult things about our job are, honestly, there's no one formula for mentorship, right? Every student that comes to you is going to need different things, and you're going to have to be a different, mentor to those different students, kind of meet them where they are. That's an enormous challenge. I would say, the tax on mental health on young people in today's world world is unprecedented and, and getting worse and not better. And we're not trained to deal with those things. And so when you get to an institute, finding out like, what are the institutional structures in place to support my students when they are in need? Maybe they have an undiagnosed learning disability. Maybe they have some serious mental health problem that needs to be addressed. That doesn't mean they can't get a PhD. There are structures that are in place at most institutions to support them, and you should leverage them and not necessarily take that entire burden on yourself. Be there for them when they need you. If a student comes to my office in tears, I drop what I'm doing, we go for a walk. But that's hopefully not that common. It is more common than you think it is sitting here right today. So that is our biggest challenge, is helping people kind of get to the finish line. And I'm sure all of you can empathize with those days where you're like, advisor, just want to curl up in a puddle under my desk or lab bench. Can you please help me? And then the second thing I think is fundraising, right? So in my institution, it's extremely expensive to support the students, and overhead is very high. And so overhead is a fee that the institution takes out of every grant dollar that you bring in. The rest of the money is typically going to tuition and stipend. There's very little left over for research. And so we do, in the States anyway, a lot of tap dancing for funds. And that can be very difficult, especially if you have a student who kind of checks out for a year, and then you've got to, make product or make an argument for why you can continue to support that particular project. So those, I think, are some of the things that you're not really trained for, that you kind of have to learn on the job, but reach out to others so that they can help you.
Yeah, just to add a little bit more, I would say for me and in general, for many of us, one of the biggest challenges is the rejection rate that you get. And this is talking about rejection in terms of papers. So some of you probably submitted papers and you've seen some of the decisions that come from there. And you can imagine being a PI that sees a lot of those, rejection from your colleagues when you submit proposals. And you sort of have to be, as a PI, you sort of have to be that guy that pretty much absorbs all of that, because you cannot transfer the emotions to the people you work with. And also as a PI, you do get some assessment that could be bad from your colleagues, because we are also assessed, and we sit down at meetings and talk about how we are mostly publishing papers in journals with impact factor of 3. Why not journals in impact factor of 10? And I'm like, do you really know what it takes to submit that paper and get it? So there's a lot of negatives that come to you as a PI that you sort of have to absorb and find a way to let go, because you just cannot transfer those to the people that work with you. So you sort of act as a barrier, as in a way, and you never learn that until you start to experience it.
Hello. May I go? Okay, sorry. Hello, my name is Seth Keynes from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. My question was, is there anything that caught you off guard when initially starting your job in academia, or was it how you expected it to be?
So I remember the day I decided, you know what, I think I want to be a professor someday. I was an undergrad and I really admired my professors. And I thought professors sit around and they're just thinking about things and reading books, and those things are important. So what I realized is you don't get to do as much as that as you would like, but they're important, right? Like you are your brain. And so you have to schedule that time. Like, I am going to read a book. I am going to explore this new topic area. And sometimes it happens out of necessity, like, oh, I have a proposal due in 2 weeks and I need to read up on this or whatever. But yeah, that was kind of the biggest surprise to me. But again, it is what you make of it, and you carve out that time to do what you think is important as a professor.
My biggest surprise at more of a teaching institution was that we don't have as many faculty and we have a high course requirement. So this past year, basically on a week before classes started in August, I was asked to teach an extra class. And that was a huge surprise to me. And I just, was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? But it's just one of the realities. If you want to be at more of a teaching based school, there are those teaching needs. And sometimes if, there's somebody that's either stepping out or not available during that semester, someone has to step up and teach those classes. So that's something that was a big surprise to me this year, but I got to learn more from it and got to the challenge of teaching that class.
Yeah, for me, I was fortunate to be kind of blissfully ignorant of gender bias in my all through school. I mean, you can have little things like you're supposed to be bad at math now at sixth grade, that kind of stuff, but you ignore that and get through. But I didn't really experience it until I was a faculty member, and then it kind of hits you like a wall of bricks. So like bias in the academy is prominent, enormous, and something that you have to develop strategies around dealing with. Unfortunately, I'm doing a workshop on it later if you want to come, but it's everything, like interacting with staffers who are there to support you. They might not want to support you in the same way. It manifests in teaching evaluations from students, gender differences in expectations when you go to give a keynote talk and people tell you, you're in the wrong spot. Those kinds of things are going to be kind of daily occurrences. And so that was really surprising because I was like, I'm a scientist, we're all perfectly objective and wonderful. And people are still people, no matter where you put them. And so like the politics of academic institutions tend to be much greater than what you hope, right? You expect the best of these folks in these esteemed positions, and they're still people at the end of the day with emotions and like goals and plans and plots. And so I've had to kind of remove myself from those, what I would consider distracting politics in order to stay focused on research, and also just to develop like schema. Like I care about this incidence of bias, I will fix it because it affects my students, but I don't care about this one because it's going to be a distraction from progress in my work. And so that's something that was a huge surprise to me, but has been navigable.
Well, two things for me. One is the number of emails that you get and people expect you to act on or respond to and get upset if you don't in time. The second would be I have two things in my head, but I would say the amount of work that goes into teaching a class at the beginning. Over time, you get your materials, you fine tune them, but at the beginning, just setting up a course is a huge undertaking. I think it took me a lot to put together my first class than to submit my first paper. So yeah. Maybe I'm just better trained as a researcher. Maybe that's the reason.
Hello, this is Mia from Memorial University of Newfoundland, Canada. And my question is, as a PhD student looking for a postdoc, what are the important aspects the professors will look at for selecting the candidate? Thank you.
It's pretty similar to finding a faculty job. So most times if a professor has a postdoc position, they probably wrote a grant to get the money to fund that position. So they'll be looking to hire the best person that can help them meet the requirements of that grant. So hopefully you have some experience in the work and you have evidence to show you can actually work and finish the work, maybe in terms of paper. So those are the things that will be pretty important to me if I was looking for a postdoc.
I agree with all of that. And I would just add, the ideal postdoc is really excited about the opportunity. And the dream postdoc is going to write lots of proposals and papers and be super productive, and just kind of be a good collaborator.
I think when I've put out postdoc ads in the past, I've gotten a lot of applications that are highly irrelevant. So a good way to rise to the top is just to show that you read the ad and that you can communicate what you've done that aligns with the position that's there. That'll automatically get me like a second read at least. And so that'll make you stand out. And then of course, the rest of it, skills, communication skills, and evidence of being productive, and at least a publication there.
Yeah, thank you. So I would just add that it's important to recognize that the goals of you as the rising postdoctoral associate and the goals of the PI are somewhat in conflict, right? You want to gain a totally new skill set. The PI wants someone who can kind of hit the ground running and be really productive and additive. So these best combinations are like the yin yang version, where you're going to complement the work really nicely, gain some new skills, but not an entirely new pivot that's going to require a lot of time for you to learn new techniques. And these are, I think, absolutely correct. We get a lot of applications that are just completely off the mark. It's not undergraduate college, right? Like it's not, you can't just submit an application and have your needs met the same across a broad spectrum. Same from the PI's perspective. So there really has to be a good intellectual match where there's going to be some complement and some synergy that serves both of your needs well. So again, like new skill set for you, but also able to like contribute to the program that the PI has likely written and pretty well laid out before that. I think that's really critically important. And then thinking about something that you mentioned earlier was building out your letter writers, somebody who you might not know that well, who can really have an independent reflection on you as an intellectual. That's going to really position you well for academic institutions.
Hey, hello, my name is Pedro Puente. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Michigan. I wanted to ask, what activities or actions have you taken in your research groups to make the environment more inclusive for people?
I would say along what Dr. Plato is saying, that you meet students where they are. So recognizing every student comes with different backgrounds and perspectives and skills, and that's exciting. That's diversity, right? When you have diverse groups, you know, you have these rich perspectives that can inform the research. So valuing that, helping the students to feel valued, but also making sure they're aware of resources, because, you know, like has been said, I'm not trained as a therapist, right? I'm happy to listen and do my best, but if it reaches beyond my professional capabilities, that there's resources on campus for mental health and lots of great work going on in DEI. And I think that's something that's becoming more and more integrated throughout coursework, and something that, you know, we work to affirm in the culture of the group, you know, from day one when a student starts.
The institution where I am faculty is very different from where I did my PhD and where I did my undergraduate. And so I think I've learned a lot from my students at all levels with respect to diversity within the Black community, and so I am constantly trying to think about how to build an inclusive culture, but also recognizing that the culture that I came up in is just it's going to be different. And so I don't know if I've succeeded, but it's something I think about. The international students are coming from all over and have very different religious backgrounds and cultural backgrounds than I do, and then my colleagues did when I was in graduate school. And so I'm not sure I have the answer, but I think just being cognizant that I don't have the answer has helped me just be a little bit more humble.
For me, I guess one of the things I've tried to do is just, you know, try and leverage or try and learn from some of the resources on campus. Because different universities will definitely have different offices that can help teach faculty and you know, teach them different skills basically to be more inclusive. Like, for example, we have a lot of first-gen students at our university, and a lot of the times that mentorship or even teaching needs to be slightly different or tailored towards first-gen students. So learning more about what resources are available, I think, is a great way too.
Yeah, so in my group, I think like the most basic thing somebody can do if they have a website is to put on their website a diversity and inclusion statement to articulate, like, in this group we care about this. I similarly put stickers on my door for various groups so that students know, even if they're not in my group, this is a safe place to come and talk to somebody who might be able to support you in these issues. And then I think my group members are in some cases self-selecting. They know that I value inclusivity diversity and expect them to be respectful of one another and a diversity of ideas. And if there's a problem with that, such as like inappropriate pronoun use or a lack of effort to use appropriate pronouns or things like that, we address it, and try to understand it with independent conversations with each person. This is why that was upsetting to that person. How do you feel about this now? These are the actions we're going to take to try and rectify this particular situation. And none of it is punitive. It's all done like through this lens of understanding. I know other PIs who don't hire any graduate students or postdocs without the entire group interviewing them. And these are 30-person laboratories, right? Like it is a big ordeal. And then there's like an iterative process. And I think that, for me, I don't love that because I think it can also build in its own form of bias. Like, we didn't like that guy. And so we're going to bring him in. So I make those decisions, but that's a way that you can think about kind of having a litmus test of the inclusivity of your particular, group. And the last thing I do is actually try and none of my students take me up on this, is very sad, but like try to get all of my students to engage in diversity, equity, and inclusivity activities outside of the institution in the local community. So they recognize the importance.
Yeah, so for my group, there's really no barrier. We pretty much try as much as possible to take away the barrier that, could exist for certain groups of people from applying to work with us in our group. And the other thing for me also is to recognize each person's individuality. Like one of us said, people are different and they come from different places with different beliefs and religion and all that. So I do try to I do recognize that, not just try to. I recognize that, I respect that. And when we have group work that, requires tasks to be divided, there is no division, based on gender or what you look like and stuff like that. So for the most part, create a level playing ground for everyone and support everybody to the best extent, and thankfully my institution is doing a lot in terms of ensuring inclusivity and sort of integrating diversity into our institution. So thankfully we are able to also take advantage of some of those available resources as well. A great question.
Thank you. My name is Yoy. I'm a fifth-year PhD student at Johns Hopkins University. I just have a question about what is the prominent differences between being a senior PhD student and being a new postdoc, especially in terms of the amount of work we do and the time spent in between the experiment and the writing either papers or grants, and the amount of mentoring that we receive. Thank you.
So MIT just launched this new postdoctoral fellowship program, and we've actually polled a lot of the postdocs and the faculty about this. And all the postdocs articulate, I'm generalizing obviously, that they're very sad that they didn't get enough mentorship time. And all the faculty articulate that the thing they value most in a postdoc is independence. And so these two things are like, right, kind of, again, like orthogonal interests. And so one of the things that I hear faculty really value in a postdoctoral researcher, and I think, some people here have mentored more and should offer counter arguments, but is to operate independently and try to see you, because they're trying to see how is this person going to operate when they are running their own group. Are they able to generate ideas? Are they able to answer questions on their own? Are they able to lead their own research and then maybe even mentor a couple of other graduate students? So that's the kind of thing that a lot of people are looking for, but really your postdoc advisor should at least be talking to you about your research plan. So one of the structures that I think is really useful is to look at the postdoctoral mentoring plan that almost all faculty are required to write before they hire and accept a postdoc. And then there's usually like a goals document that complements that postdoctoral mentoring plan. Get a hold of that early and see it. A lot of the postdocs at my institution don't see it until the end of their first year, and they say, oh, I didn't realize I was being evaluated on these things, or that I should have had a plan for goals and number of meetings to go to, a number of papers to publish. And so early on, evaluate like what you want in to come out of your 1 or 2 years in your postdoctoral position early on, have those conversations with your PI and say, I just want to have, one conversation about our plan that is separate from the research conversation, and have a clear kind of path, and so that your expectations are articulated in both directions. What are your expectations? What are the postdoctoral mentors' expectations? And that can really go a long way. There's a great National Academy of Science, Engineering, Medicine report, an ASEM report on mentoring. And they give some tips to be a good mentor, but there's also a section on mentoring up and how to find what you're lacking. So if you go somewhere and you have a garbage postdoc advisor who doesn't really want to invest in you, or doesn't maybe have the bandwidth to invest in you, seek other mentors, right? There's tons of faculty there. They'll be happy to talk to you. Your postdoc advisor may not reflect kind of who you are and what you need. Maybe hasn't navigated the things you need to navigate. Go and find other mentors. And most faculty are willing to take an hour to talk to anybody who's at their research institution.
Just to build off a couple of those points, I guess don't be afraid to ask your potential while you're interviewing, the questions that are you going to get what you expect out of the postdoc? How much mentoring will I do if that's something you want to get out of it? Are there teaching opportunities if that's something you want to get out of it? Also, one thing that we did during my postdoc that was really helpful is kind of have regular check-ins. Where in that meeting, we wouldn't necessarily talk about research or mentoring. We would just talk about am I getting out what I wanted out of the postdoc? Is my advisor, am I meeting the expectations of my advisor? So trying to set up those regular meetings, I think, can be helpful too throughout the postdoc.
Hi, this is Meng Li from George Washington University, another Washington. And thanks a lot for all of your answers. I have a question. So at the very beginning of your career path, how did you find out the specific research topics that you wanted to focus on in the upcoming 5 or 10 years?
That is an excellent question, right? And those first few years are really critical because they define your trajectory. So one common bit of advice is to distinguish yourself from your PhD advisor, right? So it's common you've worked in that area, then you're going to go out and write competing grants, and it's kind of hard to do. So ideally, you want to think about the skill set that you have and that you've developed, and then look at all the problems in the world. There's plenty, right? It doesn't have to be, and probably shouldn't be, exactly what you worked on for your PhD. This is your opportunity to be free thinking, to do what I thought professors are spending most of their time doing, right? Like sitting and thinking and observing and reading. And I think those ideas will come. Now, there's also looking at where the funding is available. Right. And so that's often in, there's this dynamic where here's where the money is, here's where my interests are. Right. So I would encourage you to start with your interests, and then, you have a startup package. Right. And so invest in a direction you think is important, but also, at some point you have to get that external funding too. So hopefully they come together at some point.
We'll get some real talk here. So I had a vision. I think I made the mistake of following the funding a little bit too much my first couple of years. And part of it is that my startup was a lot smaller than other institutions. So I felt a lot of pressure to bring in money so I could support students. So that was a mistake, because then I had all these projects that were unrelated and I had to somehow converge them, and I just was losing focus. And so I would definitely echo that idea of kind of focusing on what you're interested in. The truth is there was also a pandemic, right? So that also shifted things, and we can be realistic about that. So as much as you want to make a 10-year plan, you have to remain flexible and think about where your skill sets will align with emerging issues in the world. And also, I think a lot of the beauty of this job, is one of my favorite things about this job, is that we get to collaborate with whoever we want. And so it's wonderful for someone new and interesting to to reach out and to have an idea that is exciting. And I think the flexibility to go for that idea while remaining realistic about your bandwidth, which I'm still learning, is a great opportunity.
Yeah, and I would echo that a lot of my best ideas came from going out to coffee with somebody, and it can kind of be like mentoring, you know, your new faculty, you're learning, you find a mentor, you get excited about ideas and, you know, team up and then you also can learn writing skills and, you know, kind of like on the job learning, right, with your mentor that you're collaborating with.
Oh gosh. Okay, thank you so much for all of the wonderful questions. And I know some people didn't have an opportunity to ask their questions, but I think this whole conference is kind of an opportunity to interact with others, faculty, ask these questions, pick some brains. Let's thank the panelists for their time. And all of these sessions were recorded and will be available on the AEESP YouTube channel. So you can watch them afterwards if there's something else you want to go back to.